Useless Monster by Mute Crows. Chapter 3, or Chapter 2. The days were getting harder for Izuku, nights even more so. Practice with his quirk was leading to improvements while in his human form. His range was much greater from constant use, not always pulling the pain and aches to himself, just sensing out what he could for as far as possible without any serious backlash proved to be somewhat efficient. On top of that, he was working double time now that he was at the start of his third year in junior high, all too aware of the looming costs of school tuitions in his future and the new supplies that would need to come with it. He also just really wanted to get his hair cut, and the partial curls that made up his mess of hair made it wildly frustrating to find a stylist for that wasn't going to cost thousands of yen. Sundays were the most crammed day of all. Since he had no class, it just meant it was time to grab as much work time as possible. As a result, he was currently organizing books at one of the larger libraries in his part of town. It was honestly one of his favorite positions he held. The job paid the same amount every time, even on days where he was too tired to do as good of a job as his standard. That, and there was a small coffee shop attached to the library, and they would give him free hot chocolate while he worked. The downfall: it was his fourth job of the day, and he had 2 more before he could sleep. Izuku sighed heavily before going back to moving books. The reference section recently got updated, and he was supposed to have 6 more bookcases moved to make room for the new books. It was slow going. The reference section seemed to be rather popular today with cram school students. A project or test thing must be coming up. He ran a hand absently over the cover of the book in his hand, something about the halting of space exploration and its effects. "Whoa now! Talk about down in your luck!" A warm voice dragged Izuku from his blank thoughts. It was a cat. Well, it was a person with a cat quirk. He had his hair tied back in a bun and calico features that grinned widely at him. Izuku tilted his head ever so slightly, unsure of how to respond. He knew he had terrible luck, so there was no point in someone else pointing it out. "Yuka, come on, dude. You were the one that was telling me I needed to study, so help me." A second cat walked around the bookend, a rather mad look on his face and long split-end tail flicking in frustration. There was a stack of books in his arms, and the tag on his thick collar rested on top of them all. "Do you need help finding something?" Izuku set the book on its shelf to open up his hands. He was on the clock, after all. The second cat, black and white, opened his mouth to respond, but got cut off by the first, named Yuka apparently. "No, but maybe I could help you find something." Yuka grinned even further and gestured the other. "Fuzen, go ahead and start on your way to the table. I've got this one." Fuzen, adjusting the stack of books in his arms, grumbled something about showing off and walked past them both. Izuku glanced at him before looking back at the calico. He's always like that. Unfortunate, isn't it?" He laughed to himself as if he just shared some sort of joke. "Anyways, as I was saying, I think I can help you out. It just won't be help right now." "I'm not following." Izuku gave him an incredulous look. "Oh, sorry. My quirk is Lucky Break. Think of it as a good luck charm." Yuka winked and curled his right hand next to his head, like a Maneki Nako. Izuku couldn't help the small, almost smiling at. "I've been trying to practice new ways to use my quirk and wanted to offer you one of my experiments." He pulled out a little one-eyed cat charm, jiggling it to make its bell ring softly. "It won't be a big change, but even a small change of luck can go a long way. Trust me." Okay." Izuku cautiously accepted the charm, not used to any kind of material gifts, let alone ones with helpful intentions tied to them. "Thanks." "No problem. Good luck with whatever you're doing." He waved and trotted away. It was a strange interaction, but Izuku wasn't one to judge. Strange could be a perfectly defining word when it came to him. He put the charm in his pocket, bell hanging out, and went back to moving books. He had 2 hours to finish and check out with the man in charge at the desk. He somehow finished in 1. No one even came into the reference section the whole time, allowing him to work completely uninterrupted. A blissful relief that Izuku thoroughly enjoyed, as he accepted the payment the desk handed him and hurried out of the library. The extra hour between this job and the next meant he had plenty of time to get at least near the home of his next boss. It was a dog walking business that was rather popular, which meant he could double his work with physical training. Izuku may be a monster, but he still had dreams. He still hoped for UA, even if it ran his bag of money dry just to get there. The train was crowded as usual for the afternoon, and he took the 10-minute ride to work on a page of his schoolwork. A task that he continued even when he got off, now sitting in a very small park, while waiting for it to be closer to a respectfully early clock-in time. While not mean, his next boss tended to be a bit of a stickler when it came to their scheduling with their workers. Regardless, this extra time meant he could get close to finishing what was assigned for the weekend and get more sleep after work for the day was over. A small blessing, but what he couldn't take for granted. When he knocked on the business door, his boss immediately opened the door and wordlessly held out a leash. The dog handed to him today was a Saki Akita named Beryl under the instructions for a long and hard run. Apparently, the dog was normally hiking long distances daily, but his owner got injured and was unable to even walk. Izuku took the leash, strapped his bag a bit more securely, and thanked his boss as he led the dog to the streets. The dog was thankfully rather well trained, as it paced Izuku's fast jog without any sudden tugs or pulling. It was relaxing, letting himself run on autopilot to the point that he started to search out with his quirk. He had come to learn that he could actually start to recognize certain pains. People with localized chronic pain only got temporary respite from his quirk. He likes to give them a break, and have become a sort of comfort to find. Izuku hummed softly when he passed the older couple that walked through the nearby park regularly, pulling away the pain in their joints and watching as they stood a little straighter, smiles a bit brighter as they continued. He nodded to the mother with bruises under her shirt that made his chest ache, knowing the injuries would not be gone for long. Returned the bright smile of the child in a wheelchair with a small one of his own, the pain in his arms and hands less than they were weeks ago. A good sign that the kid was adapting to the use of the chair steadily. Familiar pains were a comfort. It meant he was actively helping people who might need it and regularly. The collection of injuries and pains stacked slowly, but Izuku kept up his pace with Beryl, the dog panting happily as he trotted along. Then, on his return trip to drop off Beryl, he felt one that was frighteningly familiar, just at the edge of his range and coming closer at a steady pace. A fast pace, too, since they were going in opposite directions. The burning soreness of dry eyes was accompanied by what must be fading bruises, if the faint and dull tenderness was anything to go by. This wasn't the first time he has found the hero since the last time he actively shifted, and probably wouldn't be the last if he stays living around his hometown. He did his best to keep himself calm, fully aware that Eraserhead had no possible way of recognizing him like this, and debated lifting the pain again. It would probably be the 6th time he's done it total. Even pros need a little help sometimes, in his opinion at least, and he did his best to help when he found his way near their battles. The pros and cons were weighed, and he was about to grab the sensation when he visibly spotted the man on the other side of the road, a few grocery bags in his hands. Seeing him made up Izuku's mind, and he tugged the feeling as sharply as he could, hoping the speed would make it harder to feel the direction it was pulled to. Eyes whipped over in his direction, and he pointedly did not look anywhere but straight ahead as he put everything he could into looking like a casual dog walker. The bell on the charm fell and hit the ground, jingling quietly as Izuku left it behind and didn't look back. He made it back and dropped off Beryl without any notable feeling of being followed. Walking to his last job of the night, he pulled out the cat charm. It now had 2 eyes. A small change of luck can go a long way. Izuku smiled softly and put the charm into the small pocket of his bag along with his plush and photos, and thanked his lucky stars for the first time in a long time. School. Honestly, the most tiring part of Izuku's day, and he was literally homeless with multiple jobs and minimal safety at best. Even the hero fight that almost made him late to school was little to get him excited for today. Career aspiration forms were to be filled out and turned in today, and Izuku knew all too well that all it would do is make his day hell. He turned in his form first, hoping that with it at the bottom of the pile, he will manage to slip under the radar. So he sat curled over his notebook and wrote out his schedule for the next 2 weeks, trying to figure out where he could fit in as much work as possible without breaking himself. His class chatted loudly, the rowdy atmosphere growing quickly and peaking when the teacher finally got all of the forms, leafed through them all, and then laughed before tossing them to the side carelessly.
I don't even need to read this, do I? I know perfectly much all of you want to become heroes, right?
He laughed louder as the class whooped and cheered, Izuku sinking into his seat a bit.
Oh, don't lump me in with these second rights!
Bakugo kicked his desk forward so that it hit the back of the student in front of him.
I'm far beyond what any of these losers are even close to capable of.
Izuku dropped his head onto his notebook, covering his head with his arms as if to hide from the surge of loud complaints that were shut off. A growing air of frustration from the class and smug amusement from Bakugo covering the room until the teacher cut them off.
Oh, right. You're signing on to the UA entrance exams, aren't you, Bakugo?
The boy grinned and puffed up with confidence, mouth opening to probably add some snide remark to the mix.
But Naruto?
The class froze. Izuku bit down the whine that tried to escape with the weight of the entire room turning towards him. The absolute roar of laughter that echoed off the walls of the room made his chest tight in regret. Why did he have to try? It never worked in his favor.
Really? You think you can get anywhere near to the gates?
A pretty great book doesn't make you a hero. You doesn't just look at your quirk, guys. He tried to talk over the din, holding his notebook to his chest as he stood. Bakugo's hand slammed against his desk with a loud smack that grew into an even louder explosion, blowing Izuku back across the desk behind him. The student there laughed as he leaned aside to let Izuku roll to the floor. He felt the ache of what would soon be bruises along his back and hip as he forced himself to breathe evenly. Panic in front of the class would leave him to be eaten alive.
The heck do you think a weak quirk like yours will do, huh? You will never even reach the shadow I will leave over the history books, Deku!
Bakugo towered over him, and he scooted backwards until his back hit the wall and did his best to ignore the way his muscles automatically tensed with each spark and crackle across his palms. I'm not trying to, Kachan! Bakugo stepped closer and set off an explosion close enough that Izuku felt the lick of the flames swipe against his skin in a light burn.
You are below me, shitty Deku!
He growled, glaring Izuku down until his eyes dropped and he curled up a bit in silent submission.
Bakugo, bell is about to ring,
the teacher called in a careless tone, and on cue the bell rang for class change last of the day. Izuku stayed on the ground as the class returned to their seats, and Bakugo scoffed at him and threw his legs up on his desk. Just 50 more minutes, and I can get out of here. The next teacher walked in and told Izuku to get in his seat, a few snickers coming from the students as he scrambled to pick himself up and sit. He sat quietly and swapped his schedule for one of his few and packed analysis books, pulling out the .3 pen he used to condense his writing to as small as possible while still staying readable. One more class, and he could go. The final bell was never so lovely to hear. Izuku quickly stood and hurried to pack away his things, careful to hide the clothes in the bag. No one but administration knew he was homeless at this point. He had to fill out the paperwork after all. He brushed his shoulder against his burnt cheek and was glad to feel that it was already starting to heal. His hand barely even glanced across the top of his analysis book before it was snatched away.
I'm not done with you, Deku!
Bakugo looked at the cover of the notebook and sneered, holding it up for his lackeys to laugh at.
You never learn a thing, do you? Your weak quirk and weaker existence make you less than dirt, you nerd! Even now you have done nothing of anywhere to even consider trying for part of the hero world.
Wait, Kachan, give it back, please! He tossed the notebook up and caught it between both hands, scourging it through with a concentrated blast. Izuku choked as he watched the couple hundred yen that it cost him whisk away in the destruction of his few belongings. He fought back tears as he watched him toss it out the window, face unapologetic.
You really are worth less than the oxygen you breathe. Forget UA and then the ghost of a thought of trying to get in.
He shoved Izuku aside with a smile, the brief contact being all he needed to burn a hole into the shoulder of Izuku's uniform jacket. His lackeys laughed and added their comments on how low Izuku is in the scope of the world, and Izuku just braced himself in the face of it all. He had no way to fight back anyways.
Oh, and one more thing.
Bakugo shot him a mockingly bright grin from the doorway.
If you really want to help the world so bad, go ahead and do everyone a favor by taking a dive off the roof.
And he was gone, laughter echoing down the hall as his buddies followed. Izuku stood in silence for a moment before he let the shaking take over and tears fall. He smothered the quiet sobs as he slipped his bag over his shoulders and made his way out of the school to try and find the notebook. The small hope of recovering something from it sat in the back of his mind, but that would, of course, be too kind of a turnout for someone like him. The dripping book hung sadly in his hand as he left the school gates, taking the long way to his first shift of the night to try and recover from the weight in his heart. Jeez, what happened to not letting them get to me? He drug a hand down his face as he opened his notebook to see the words bleeding together in a smear of black and blue. Ruined. It was a huge loss of precious time and information. He stopped in the shade of an overpass to put the book away. It was ruined, but if someone managed to pick apart the information in there, it would be dangerous to the people inside of it. A thick gurgling sound echoed off the walls, and Izuku felt a weird strain of what should have led to pain, similar to how the buildup of a bruise felt, but the body didn't feel like a body at all. He turned slowly as a voice fell heavy from whatever was seeping out of the sewers.
A medium invisibility cloak? It'll do.
Izuku hardly even blinked, and he was drowning in the sludge of the villain wrapping around him. He felt way too clearly the way the sludge forced its way into his lungs as he tried to fight back. His eyes watered as he clawed at the sludge.
Don't worry, kiddo. It will hurt less than a minute, and then you won't have to feel anything anymore.
Excited laughter bubbled out of a misaligned mouth as the large eyes stared him down.
With you, I could slip by that bastard, no problem.
I can't get a breath like this. Crap, I don't want to die like this. Maybe if I just... Izuku tried to focus on his grip. He just needed to focus on letting go. He just was going to die. His vision was getting fuzzy and thoughts sluggish, and his body felt like it was on fire. His hands fell away from trying to rip at his captor, and his grasp of consciousness slipped away. The last thing he registered was the distant sound of clattering. A rapid patting against his cheek jerked Izuku awake. He coughed up sludge and gasped roughly as he sat up. He patted himself down and huffed out a shocked breath.
Oh, thank goodness.
Izuku's gaze whipped up and took in the full height of All Might, broad smile and booming voice, and his spirit lifted for all of 3 seconds before he registered the information coming from his cork. Pain! Oh, so much suppressed and radiating pain rippling under the brightness of All Might's exterior. Izuku felt the burning of one lung, not 2, which was alarming to realize, and the strain of literally every muscle. It was like he was blowing himself past every limit he should be respecting. The entirety of his left side held the dull ache of a messily healed wound, and it broke Izuku's heart to feel it all. Is this what the world did to its brightest and most idealistic hero? Izuku felt the tears welling up again as he reached for the pain to figure out what all he can take, even for a moment, only now realizing he had been speaking by the sudden and confused silence.
Are you okay, my boy?
Is this what the world does to its heroes? Izuku's voice was rough from the assault of the villain. What kind of world lets heroes shatter in silence as the monsters fight to grab at any speck of their light? All Might looked confused, scratching at his jaw with a finger. He went to speak again, but every possible question escaped him as the tears fell down Izuku's face, his arm reaching out slightly. Please, let me help with the pain. Just a little. His voice cracked in the same way that the smile on All Might's face did at his words.